Oh,
Recording in progress, yes. Good afternoon, good evening, hello. My name is Texas Isaiah. I am a first-generation visual narrator born in Brooklyn and currently residing in Los Angeles, California. My pronouns are he or they. Go ahead, y'all. Introductions.
I can go next. Okay. My name is Terrell Brooke. I use he, him pronouns and identify as like hi, fem, he. I reside in Los Angeles. And yeah, I'm a, what do they call it? Interdisciplinary artist. But I'm most intrigued by sound and our relationship to it. And so I'm present with that all the time. Can I popcorn to you, Bearboi?
Sure, I guess I can go next.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Bear, Bearboi Photo, Bearboi. I am originally from Maryland, but I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's cold. It is about negative 20 degrees last week. So I am also in multiple areas of the arts, but majority mostly in photography. And in terms of pronouns, I don't care. Is that a word? Feeling very ungendered today. So I lead off to say I know what that perm felt like on my scalp. So that's what it is today. Thank you.
Wow, I'm so excited to be in this conversation. My name is Riley Snorton. I'm a writer and an academic at the University of Chicago. I live in Chicago, so not quite as cold as Minnesota currently, but it can get there. I was born in the Bronx. My work is broadly about Blackness, questions of sexuality and transgender histories and cultural production. So it's, it feels like such a like divine opportunity to be in conversation with artists, and to so rarely be in conversations with other Black transmasculine folks. So I just want to mark all these things that are registering in my spirit as we begin the conversation.
Amazing. So a little icebreaker. What color or song is everyone feeling today? I will start off. I think that I am kind of within like a violet is where I am right now. Song-wise, Sylvester, You Make Me Feel is where I currently am. So
I'm just making sure I got the title right. So the color that I'm vibrating with is like a neon green, maybe a little iridescent, if that's, if y'all can see that. And the color that, the song that vibes with me right now and I've been listening to is Everything by Mary J. Blige. I always come back to that song because of that damn video. And just like the expansiveness and her relationship with her spirituality at that moment in her career and everything. And so, yeah, that's what I've been vibing with.
I would also say a cooler color, like a blue kind of violetness, and then also lavender. So two different types of colors, but it's two different feelings, right? And I would, in terms of songs, I can't give you a song, but I can give you an artist. I can give you a feel. Ombre, definitely feeling that energy right now. Lost, Light Signal, Band Practice, one of them. And yeah, so thanks.
Yeah, I'd say teal. And song, the first one that came to mind was actually I Wish I Knew How It Feels to Be Free, the Nina Simone live version, 1976.
Yes.
Solid.
I'm feeling that. I'm feeling all of that. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here with you all. And so, I'm gonna see Riley, I'm gonna have you kind of begin with sharing with us about, the presence of Black trans, masculine individuals throughout history.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to kind of set some stuff up about the historical. I guess a couple of points before jumping in. One is that like my kind of relationship to history has always been about the political. So I think, there's so much about understanding, the survival strategies of folks in the past as ways of enlivening ways to survive in the present and the future. And I think the other thing is that I guess one could say I have a non-binary approach to Black trans history, so that I completely affirm, as much as I understand that some figures are going to show up in a whole bunch of different histories all at once. And I think that that's actually, it can be a way of thinking about honoring the multiplicities that we already hold. So in thinking about it, certainly I'm not attempting to give a comprehensive view of Black trans masculine folks, but I was just thinking just of a few figures, a few names, especially those folks I think in the 19th century, or at least born in the 19th century, that we don't get to think about as often. And some of those folks include a figure like Ralph Carwenio, who actually is also a Midwesterner, who was born and raised in Wisconsin. Black and indigenous transmasculine figure who we find out about because he gets brought up on charges in 1914. And so often the way that we come to know Black trans ancestors is because of their encounter with the criminal system. And incidentally, this person actually gets dropped of the charges, but they were initially brought up for marrying someone in their community. And once the kind of typical plot of gender reveal came out, it led to criminal charges that were eventually released. Another figure who I think is much more resonantly goes across lots of different histories is a person like William Cathay. And I wish that I'd been able to write about them in my book. But in some senses, they're understood to be the first Black woman to be in the US military. They served as a Buffalo Soldier. But one of the things that I feel like is super important about lifting their name is that, in fact, according to accounts of their neighbors and community, they went by lots of different names and lots of different genders over the course of their life. And I'm always so interested in kind of thinking about what does it mean when we might think about gender as a form of as a strategy rather than as something that one possesses or owns. Certainly in the 20th century, we know more folks, and the kind of advent of the clinic made it very, made some clear lines about who was trans and who was not. Some of the figures that I wrote about include James McCarris, but also, there's been some robust conversations going on around Pauli Murray and whether or not Pauli Murray would have been understood to be transmasculine, Pauli Murray being a priest, a poet, a legal scholar, and many, many other things. And I'll just leave with this, a kind of a note on the artist, which is to issue the name of Wilmer Lilacs Broadnex, who actually was a kind of huge figure in the gospel music scene, and ended up performing with 5 different musical groups over the course of the early 20th century. Which is to say that as we will get into in terms of the present, there have been so many different spaces in which Black transmasculine presence has been a contribution. So I'll pause there because really it's about, in some ways, beginning the list of names of ancestors that are part of this conversation. But I'm happy to also kind of pick up or follow up if people have other thoughts or questions.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it's incredibly important to always share those names because not everyone in community has access to those narratives, which can create a huge sense of loss, you know, especially understanding in how we are able to be multidimensional, right? So some names may apply to our lived existences in the current moment, but with the kind of expansiveness that we may hold within ourselves, we always need to accumulate more names, right? In order to create full embodiments of ourselves, or at least to see that reflected as best as possible. And it makes me also think about how at the moment, within this moment of so much devastation and haziness and loss, but also knowing that it is a very exciting time as well, with how many people in community are creating different narratives and able to share, right? In many ways, in various ways, because of social media, digital platforms, because of, depending on where we are geographically, we're able to actually physically connect with people. Although in the current moment, that is very complicated. And most likely, not able to happen, because of COVID. And so I'm always holding, those two truths, right? The devastation, and then also the space to connect.
Thanks for holding that space and possibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It means so much, even virtually.
Yeah. And so, one thing, I guess that I thought about, one of the many things that I thought about before I kind of like ventured into this work that was extremely complicated to make, was, I guess like how like does an individual like who like experienced like multi dimensions of Black girlhood, whatever that may mean to people, like but blossom otherwise, what does that really mean, for us, for people who are able to relate to those times? Because I always love to remind people that childhoods are very complicated. Not everyone is going to resonate with their childhood in the same way as somebody else does. But what does that experience mean? And also, how does it like create like a fixture for masculinity and or gender and or neither of those things,
I'm not gonna keep going first.
Yeah, I'll go second.
Okay. I'm not gonna keep doing that. Oh man, no, what you mentioned just made me really smile, because with all the changes and adaptations and transitions and stuff that I've been and played with, this sense of like authenticity has always been there for me. And like I feel like there's this relationship to the world where like I felt like I've always felt myself, and then I'm just waiting for other folks to catch up, or like I'm trying to give them language as I continue to be authentic and not be like compressed as I'm trying to live my life into like any boxes or anything like that. But yeah, like when I think about my own childhood, and I mean, yeah, you've introduced this relationship to me, Texas Isaiah, about um, some type of reclamation and relationship, ongoing relationship with girlhood. I think it's a grounding idea as someone that has, like I mentioned, like been holding myself independently of the environment around me always, right? So that is like giving me a weird relationship to age and maturity and all those things. And how we, when you think about maturing into womanhood and like you said, like going someplace else, so um I think fondly on the ways that um I acknowledge the energy within myself, even at a young age. I think fondly about the wit and the mutability of myself. Even saying like mutability is like this power dynamic, but it was just um like I had to be me. So like, like as I learned things and as I matured in society, there was always like this reflective piece for myself around like, okay, and then what does this mean for me? And then what about me though? Like, who am I going to be in spite of all of this other stuff that y'all talk about, So yeah, I feel a lot of joy when I think about my internal world, um, from then until now. And the consistency that that creates for my gender embodiment.
Ah, um, okay. This is a question that I have tried to ask myself um, for about a couple of years. Um, and it was just recent, um, maybe like in the past 2 years, that I fully recognized my Black girlhood. Um, and also adding on to the fact that I was also a fat, dark skinned kid too, adding those two layers and what that looks like. Um, and um, my, I guess, deviance or deviating from what was expected of me and gender wise. Um, I found a lot of things about myself, but I also found a lot of the hardships and adversities, um, the disposal, the adultification, um, being subjected to extreme labor at a very young age, right? Little, little Black girls. Also, depending in birth order, right? My sister was a caregiver before she was even herself, and ultimately, some people, right, not all, but some people who have had Black girlhoods are sitting at a very unique, um, again, childhoods are complex, right? Um, but really sitting at another layer of oppression to the point where you don't even know yourself outside of labor. Um, and that was something, whether that is labor of a caregiver, right? Or of a mother, of an auntie, of a sister, of whatever the case may be. Um, and that was something that I most recently kind of realized is who am I outside of labor? Because that's how I was socialized. I was socialized to provide um, multiple amounts of labor to try to fit into femininity, which in the way that society describes femininity is often anti-Black anyway. So me as a dark skin, as a dark skinned fat Black girl, right, with 4B or 4C, I don't have 4C hair, child, but with a curl pattern or texture, right? Um, what are the, I guess now what my question is what are the consequences of me deviating from femininity and adopting masculinity in the ways that society again pushes onto trans masculine people and pushes onto Blackness as a whole, because a lot of the things that we name out of convenience, and a lot of it is out of convenience, but a lot of the things that we name as masculine is often colorist anyway. Or is rooted in some type of colorism, or fat phobia, or whatever the case may be. So I guess that's kind of been my journey, along with embracing my girlhood, embracing my Black girlhood at that, embracing the perms, the everything in my hair, and also, understanding how socialization works. And so that's ultimately me. In terms of gender, I was a binary trans guy. I built a good portion of the representation for dark-skinned, fat Black trans men, to now transitioning out of the binary. What does that look like for me when I have a beard, when I have dark, when I have a beard and a deep voice, and now being assumed to be a cis man? What does that look like for me? So I hope that answers the question. But yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate how the conversation's going. And, I'll just acknowledge that oftentimes, like in my writing and also like in terms of what it means to sit in the profession, I try to distance myself from the personal, but I really love the opportunity to reflect. There's so much that's been resonant about what people shared. And, like one of the things I'd say, like in terms of ongoingly accessing my Black girlhood, that happens for me in relation to being in therapy. And I think that that's been super helpful as part of like a practice of honoring my various childhood selves. But I also, there's something that's like super resonant to me about thinking about the various sites of like what can feel like power is domination or violence or harm. That there's also like this kind of experience of pressure that feels like important to like register in the conversation in terms of, you know, the scripts of masculinity that one wants to rewrite or to unlearn in relation to what feels available. And I feel really grateful because I think in many ways, when I began to understand myself as being trans, it was also in the space of thinking with and among feminists about like how genders are connected in a broader ecology. And so like this, whether it's about thinking about these kind of earlier selves that are still present, or if it's about also kind of imagining what it means, you know, in some sense, I think therapy's offered me the question that's like, what does it mean to like be your own father? As like someone who's raised in a single parent household, like what does it mean to go back to these childhood selves that are expressing various forms of need and be able to address them? I hope that that's, I mean, you know, like that's, I guess where I pause for now, but I also just want to underline what I heard is Bear's huge question about like, what does it mean to define yourself outside of labor? I'm like, you know, I'm just sitting with it because it's a gigantic question that seems to also require a kind of letting go, an unlearning, as well as like a rescripting, and from what, you know, that I think is like um sitting with this kind of, whether as you put it earlier, Texas Isaiah, like this kind of room of possibility, and also this like sitting with what's so difficult, or it's like also thinking about just like what's pressure and possibility is constantly in relation to one another.
Yes. You know, I think about how frequent that labor is too, how much we have to do that with the people that we love, if anything. I think about that versus people who may not have the capacity to understand or love us, or may not choose to do so. That's different. But doing that work with people that we love, even people who see us, thinking about our value outside of all of the labor that we have to be tethered to. So I really appreciate that. It's something I've been thinking about a lot, very slowly. It's slowly boiling, slowly cooking, and understanding there are just no answers. I think that there may be multiple avenues and paths that we can create, but as far as like an answer, I think we will be searching for that within this current lifetime and the next one, as long as capitalism still exists. But no, I really appreciate that, and I'm sitting with that currently. And I also want to note that I think what everyone has shared like resonates with me, so I don't want to sort of restate anything that has been said, but I think that it all applies. And so, unless anybody wants to jump in, I think within these last, I would say maybe 10 years of what was, I guess, considered the first wave of, I guess, trans people in the media. I think about Laverne Cox being on the cover of Time, the emergence of Janet Mock, Teak Milan, in media per se, specifically. I think that, I had like kind of started like whatever you would call this journey, right? This capaciousness, I would say, around that time. And I remember feeling very disconnected from these ideas of activism very early on. And I think that that has so much to do with growing up in East New York, Brooklyn, growing up in, neighborhoods that are often forgotten about, and not relying on the promises people make. And that doesn't mean that, I was a hopeless kid, or that I've never been hopeful even within my adulthood, but I think I'm more of a realist in terms of understanding that there are just some things that people may not be able to do or may not want to do in terms of supporting others. And so I think that that's inspired my relationship to creativity, because I, as just a first generation person, I am, maybe one of the first known artists within my family. I'm certain that I've had many artists in my family, right? But one of the first known, the first to pursue it. And there was always a space within creative work that I found to be extremely beautiful. And mostly like one of the most, and also one of the most kind of remarkable healing mechanisms. Learning that it can be such a deep dedication to our ancestors, right? Because when we talk about labor, we can also talk about how creative labor is vastly unseen, but people love to consume it. Even the people who are in those creative industries. Like I could care about what I do, but that doesn't mean that I necessarily will care about the creative labor that somebody else does, right? And so there's that. And so I'm curious about, how can like creative work especially Black trans creative work, can be used as a healing mechanism, whether or not within our own creative practices or the creative practices that we have seen from others in community.
So I'll start just because I want to break the pattern, but also I think it's really like there's so many fascinating parts of that question that you raised, Texas Isaiah. Started like what I heard initially was like a question about what and to whom are we accountable? Because I think like often thinking about the kind of labor of visibility and what does it mean in relation to community, that there's a conversation to be had too about like you know my like obviously I wish I have deep regard and care for like Laverne and Janet and Teak, and I also want I also I guess am making I have this sense about them that's like I hope they also experience their right to privacy. Like it's not up to them to have to like represent in that way, and I think that that's but I appreciate the various ways in which they have been willing to take that on in different moments. But then I think also about like creativity and healing as other kind of points of connection, ones that are only partially visible too. And so on one hand, it's like maybe that's unaccounted for because it's unseen, but also maybe it's actually that privacy that allows it to circulate and be appreciated in a different way. I'm pretty suspicious of visibility politics, and we could like talk more about it, but I do also like I think I often just am thinking about the fact that like something can be in circulation, but it will circulate differently depending on the context in which it is in which is being received. And so like just even thinking about being able to go and see your show in person, it was like amazing to be able to sit with like the experience of it like across like lots of different scales. So like thinking about being able to see it with you, thinking about seeing it with my partner, thinking about seeing it with other Black trans folks, thinking about seeing it with other folks who like support the other artists who are available, and that like all of those things are happening and create different meanings. That I think is also something I just kind of appreciate about what it means to do creative work. That like the visual, the sonic, the writing are all happening differently because we're as an author of something, we're only creating part of the thing. That like it's actually about the reception and the circulation that allows it to have these other kinds of meanings and lives.
I can go. In terms of labor in creative spaces, and not only in creative spaces, but also in media, right? I experienced that burnout. I did. And it was, wow, I actually can't have anything for myself, can I? When that's not really how this is supposed to go or how it should go, right? But it does happen. And maybe that might be I'm thinking about consequences a lot in this conversation. But that might also be a consequence of visibility and the labor that's in the that we're doing, right? So whether that's being visible on social media, whether that's being visible in terms of creating and putting your work out there for people to either critique, right, um, or to relate to, right, to really absorb everything that you're trying to convey in these messages, right? It takes care and it takes a lot of time, right? But ultimately, that care is also still labor. So is there good labor, bad labor, right? And I think for um, in terms of healing mechanism and dedication for ancestors who are named and who aren't named, there are so the representation for Black trans men and Black trans masculine people is like 0 to none. It's so small. It's very small, and I guess one of the good things about um, one of the good things I guess about visibility and representation is that, hey, okay, this actually is a thing. Let's talk about it, right? Um, and in creative spaces, a lot of people absorb, right, and consume really hard messages and really hard topics um, through art. So I think that's a really good thing to um, for us to keep going in a way, but also be able to take time for ourselves um, and also to find community where people can pour back into us. And oftentimes it is very difficult. Um, I have found it, and also with mentoring other Black trans masculine people and other Black trans men, they've had difficulty with finding community. And a lot of it is online, of course, right? So that's all I want to say.
Um, um, I don't know, this makes me think about my values and how much of a cocoon I create, and my own communion with like my creative self. Um, and I don't know. I'm thinking about boundaries and thinking about the reality of being seen, um, and what it means to be unseen. I don't know if I just accept that there's this elusiveness about my gender that is ever present, that these things that I share with people. I love what you said, Texas Isaiah, about the reality that a lot of creative work is unseen, because by the time I'm sharing it with somebody, like, it's just like the aftermath, it's like the bits, and I don't have that big of a relationship to how people, in some ways, I don't have this ownership, I guess, on how it lands with people, and like I kind of like give it. um I, yeah, so embracing this elusiveness, I mean, um I'm a very private person, very internal, and yeah, I guess my communion is my creative expression. A lot of times, yeah, I even when I describe what I do, I was like, I deal with sound and people's relationship to it, like it's, but I'm like a sound editor, composer, and DJ, and so much of what I do, like I got into that just because I wanted to play music for myself. I wanted to play music for my body, and my spirit. I wanted to commune with things um, that were unseen, and like move in these moments that felt like very tense, like I just had the expansiveness of like quiet, the expansiveness of like noise. And I found communion there. So when I think about what it is for to be consumed, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm deep in it. I think I'm deep in like this thing of like what I take from like consent culture, and like what it means to reclaim certain power dynamics. And I just like refuse on an internal level to acknowledge the consumption of another without my consent, so and so I release a lot, because consent, I have to participate, like I have to participate in that thing. So I don't know, that's the cocoon, that's the thing that I've enveloped myself in, and I try to continue to turn over as some type of politic when it comes to the creative work I put out, when it comes to being in community with others. I try to be in community in spaces where we're consenting to see each other in a certain way, where, you know, if we are unseen, we're asking, you know, questions, or there's opportunity for curiosity. Does that make sense? So, I mean, these are the foundations. But I guess the largest thing I want to share is that I think I've embraced being unseen on a certain level, and I have a relationship with elusiveness that keeps things coded for me. Yeah. And if I can, I just wanted to jump back to this conversation about labor and with the ones we love, and this conversation around capitalism, because I was thinking, like, you know, where we land, or where other folks like land when it comes to feeling out validation outside of those norms. Like, I've had moments where I feel completely disoriented if I'm not laboring for someone, you know, or something. So I'm also just curious about where that lands in relationship to embodiment and feeling a certain level of authenticity, because then it feels like, you know, I'm building in real time, and, you know, I just want to inquire with you all about that.
Do you
Well,
mind
for
repeating?
one,
My bad.
go ahead.
I was
Go ahead.
gonna
No,
ask, do you mind, like repeating that question again?
So if we, as like trans embodied folks, are considering life and love outside of capitalism and labor, um, can you describe how it lands for you to play with that, to consider that, to try that on? Because for me, it's disorienting, and I very much feel outside, like a thing. That's because, you know, like you mentioned, Bearboi, like I've had a relationship to where, like, you know, to identify with labor has, you know, it's real, especially like you mentioned, being socialized as feminine, or as being seen as feminine in society. And I'm just saying, for me, I put that effort out to be like, I'm not going to work. You know what I'm saying? Or even like, I'm working and the person is telling me I don't have to work, right? Specifically, you know, like if they are seeing me outside of certain gender roles and things like that. And yeah, for me, it's not always like welcome. You know, sometimes it feels like a shedding. And I'm like, whoa, you know, this is a part of my identity that I didn't even know I was connected to. And what do I do with it?
that part. Um, wow. Okay. What do the answer to your question that I had was one word: death, avoiding it. Whether that's a physical death, whether that is an everyday mental exhaustion, right? Um, uh, you know, um, Oh my gosh, I just had my thought. Sorry. Um, and the reason why I say that is in my conversations with my mother, um, and how she did not know herself, right? She didn't have the time to be able to um, learn what she likes, like, right, like when you ask someone what are some things that you like about your mother, right, oftentimes you're going to name off things that that what she does for you, right. What do you what are some things that you love about your mother that outside of labor, right. um, and for a long time I could not answer that question. um, but when you also think about it, oftentimes, you know, oftentimes ask yourself that question: what am I outside of labor? Um, and when I say labor, I mean the forced assimilation into whiteness in the workforce, right? You know, the hot comb, right, is something that's a huge staple, you know, in our culture, right? But burning your scalp, having chemical burns, to for capitalism, right? To be able to get a job, right? And this is generations on generations on generations, right? Um, that there's a being forced into Eurocentric beauty standards and being exposed to it at a very young age in that specific childhood, right? Maybe not for everyone, but I can say for me, right? And where I grew up, DC, Chocolate City. And so in my time of experimenting with, I don't want to say the word trivial because that's insulting, but in society's um, well, how society defines femininity and masculinity, um, I was you're basically forced to perform in femininity that does not belong to blackness at an extremely young age. You're born into that, right? And uh, and also in my time of trying to deviate away from that, I was also met with, well, now you need to perform unhealthy masculinity in order to be valid and seen as a man. And because you're dark skinned, because you're fat, you're automatically over masculized and adultified. Like, and so that's um, disposability, right? Being disposed of, being erased. Your experiences with trigger warning gender violence, right? And gender violence is a lot of different things. As Hunter has redefined gender-based violence, but all of these things and what does that look like for me? It's I cannot keep changing myself for the comfortability of others. And oftentimes, and a lot of times, trans people are forced into these very restrictive, um, almost like you have to go by the book, or you got to go by the womenhood, female gender, you know, type of booklet, or you go by, you know, manhood, you know, maleness or whatever. And as a society, we should definitely um, what's the word I'm looking for? Divorce femininity from women and womanhood, and masculinity from man and manhood, right? But we're not there yet. So I hope I answered the question, Terrell. I hope I answered the question. But yeah, that's all I can say.
Yeah, no, you did. Definitely. You know, whenever I think of labor, you know, I don't think about maybe the labor that I'm like tethered to, like work wise. Like I mean, like the work, like standard work wise. But you know, I've been thinking about how, like, you know what, like when I think about love and when I think about care, right? It's like, actually, I like doing that labor. I enjoy it, right? But I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy it when it's not being reciprocated or when it's being taken advantage of. Um, taken advantage of. When it's uh, unseen, you know. So I think that there are certain things about labor, dependent on what the thing is, that I actually enjoy. Because I'm like, I want to be better at loving it. I want to be better at like caring for people, right? Because that's going to be continuous work. Like everything, there's going to be some kind of work that we're going to have to do. I just want to make sure that I'm doing it with the right people. And as very small pool of people, as you you learn, and as elders have like communicated to us, there's a small pool of people who you're going to be able to like ride with for like 30, 40, 50 years. And even that is that there's no guarantee within that. But yeah, I think about that kind of work and how I enjoy it, how I want to continue it, but want to be better at discerning who I'm doing that work with. And I think it also lends a very like particular perspective in like even how I make work, right? Because to make work is to make work for myself, or to make work for versions of myself, to make work for versions of the people who are part of that work, right? And sometimes to consider an audience, if they resonate with the labor, with the work, but that is not always a priority, right? And to me, I think that's where creative labor gets very complicated, or feels mostly exhausting to me, is when I have to consider everybody. And I don't wish to do that because it's impossible, it's interesting. The beginning stages of Flowers had so much to do with like Black transmasculine people being sort of immersed in like editorial and commercial landscapes, because I think that was in 2019. I was kind of curious about how like that would look like. And so the images that were created resonated with that kind of perspective. And then the pandemic happened, right? And continuing that work was pretty much impossible during that time. And I think that this residency offered me the time and the space to figure out what it would look like to like revamp this thinking. And so the mood board images that were created are very different from the images that are in the show. And also some of those images are on the altar. So there's also this kind of like connectivity. But I think so much of like the way that the work ended up sort of manifested was that there was a disregard to visibility. There was a huge, it's very anti-utopia, because it's not about, Black trans people not to being here and creating another world elsewhere. It's about us dreaming and us being here and acknowledging the kind of labor that we're already doing in this devastating world. And that was just something that I didn't want to ignore. Maybe I'd be interested in utopias in the future, but for now, I'm like, I don't want to run away from where we are right now, because where am I going to go? Am I going to go to another world where there's still going to be oppression, or like, like people, I'm going to be with people who are going to think the same way that they think now. Like, to me, that makes no sense. It's not practical. And so, yeah, like when, like just going back to this idea of labor, I think, when I was photographing the show, which was like also very intuitive, so each image informed the next image. It was, yeah, it's a huge disregard for labor. It's a huge disregard for utopias and pleasing people, the audience doesn't receive the satisfaction of being looked at, or to receive the satisfaction of taking away a gaze from someone until they end up at the last half chapter of the exhibition when they are being looked at by a gatekeeper. So yeah, I don't know, like as each day goes on, like I care less about those things and just care more about the kind of labor that I would like to do, again, with the right people, you know? I'll stop there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so much about racial capitalism is about capture. What can be captured, what can be identified, how do we categorize that? How do we make sure that people experience their efforts as a kind of exhaustion? But I think there's also, I mean, what I feel like I'm really hearing too in this conversation is like, you know, what's helpful about the excess of that being elusive. And I really appreciate Terrell, the way you kept using elusive, because it actually helped me to clarify something. Like, it's not even about a right to privacy, which is within the kind of legal jargon, but it's about the right to opacity, as like Edward Glissant has offered, right? Like this like desire to be in public and dissemble. Like, it's not about what you can transparently get. I think, I hope this might be a little tangential, but there's so much of this conversation too that's just making me think about the role of experiment and experimentation, and like, so much of like finding those momentary experiences of freedom to me feel like the like opportunity to give myself permission to experiment with living, and like acknowledging with myself that this is all a series of experiments. And if that's like about, I feel like that can be grounded in so many different ways, but I also just feel like I'm so interested in how creativity, imagination, the interior keeps coming up in the conversation. And what does it look like to like see the landscape and know what the expected entry point is for you to be legible or register for certain folks, but to experiment with a different door or a window or another kind of opening.
Yes. Yes. Oh man, experimentation.
Can I just quickly say thank you, three. And again, just want to give y'all some care real quick. Um, that this conversation is going great. And that's all I just wanted to say. And just
I just want to have my mic on so that you all can feel me and hear my reactions, and like, because that's a large part of how I communicate anyway. So I was like, I need to just leave this mic off so they can hear me laugh. you know, and, I need to add that. I need to add that to the conversation. But yeah, thanks for acknowledging experimentation. Full stop. You know. Yeah, I'm curious about that word and its relationship to a thing in general, when there's so many like ways that things are structured as though they are truths. I feel like experimentation is definitely an answer that I consider regularly. Mm. When it comes to healing, when it comes to um, yeah, healing. Mostly. Yeah. Can we get into spirit?
yeah, we get into it.
um yeah, so I'm here, and I'm present because of my dear relationship to Texas Isaiah as a thought partner, and peer. What do they call it? I'm just gonna make it up. But like my partner in affection, my partner in care and intentionality, You know, when I feel, you know, uninspired, I can find grace in the conversations and the considerations that Texas Isaiah is usually moving with. I'm grateful for him, and I'm grateful for a dear friend of mine that has transitioned as a transgender, Kaite Davidson, for a lot of those same reasons. And something I talked with Kaite a lot about was dream space, and I think that's relevant for where I am now when it comes to my creative expression, when it comes to my spiritual engagement, is just thinking about the truth in my dreams. What I appreciate about the latest work that you put out, Texas Isaiah, is like we've mentioned, the internal, the immaterial, in the ways that dreams create like very fundamental building blocks for everyday presence, really. I think about the lack of experience that I had with like grief and ritual when my friend Kate passed away, and the ways that I continue to sit with presence around like the conversations we had, the dreams they share with me, and yeah, and the vision for embodiment they have for themselves and for others. You know, Kaite was a big and still is very impactful as a disability advocate. And what I loved about this work and what really humbled me is the ways that as Black trans people, we can hold each other's stories and narratives with care in the present, and even, you know, in alternate time spaces. I'm grateful for the altars that still hold space for Kaite's, you know, dreams, and make tribute to his offerings to his community. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that in because I guess it does. I mean, thinking about care outside of labor, like, is just consideration. And can I share a quote? Is that okay? I wanna bring that in. I was thinking about something that I could share that was a part of Kaite's writing, and it does feel like really relevant to the conversation now. But in a open letter that he wrote when he was being acknowledged as a champion of change under Obama's legislation, he just wrote, I challenge the extent to which we place the responsibility for advocacy on those designated as leaders or champions. Advocacy is not just a task for charismatic individuals or high-profile community organizers. Advocacy is for all of us. Advocacy is a way of life. It is and this is what I really love. It is a natural response to the injustices and inequality in the world. While you and I may not have sole responsibility for these inequities, that does not alter its reality. And when he said it's a natural response to injustices, I was just gagged. Because, you know, like, I think it just acknowledges, it both counters the ways that people are put into, put on pedestals, and how ableist that is. and how that, like you all have mentioned, how that feeds into like visibility politics and things, and just affirms for me like the future in what people are saying now is like Afro mundanity, right? But the future in like every day, and I think it just really lands for me when I think about care, because sometimes yeah, like you all have mentioned, when we think about labor, if it's in relationship to um, how we've been socialized, or if it's in relationship to um, some sense of edification, one can like lose themselves. Um, but the reality that care is just a response to seeing somebody outside of oppressive measures, right? It's just the everyday way of being like, hey, but negating oppressive forces against someone. And that, I don't know, for me, removes this sense of labor, because you're not necessarily looking for a reward or equality. It's just you're witnessing someone. It's just an act of witness. So I don't know, I'm just sharing that out and wondering how it lands with you all. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know I said earlier, or earlier in the conversation, talking about care work and labor and forced labor. Please excuse my fur child, Kiki. Um,
I can't hear them that much, but
it's dinner time for her. Texas Isaiah already know what's up. But so sorry about that. And actually, can we just
okay.
somebody else go and then we can go back?
Yeah. Yeah. But you feel me? I mean, is there a way to like remove this idea of labor? I guess maybe not. But from the act of care, I mean, maybe not, because I mean, it's still feminized in society. So there's a need for like reclamation, and there's a need for affirmation, of care, being that it's usually seen as invisible. But in that moment, I just saw it outside of
Yeah.
a capitalist force.
Yeah.
Motivation was somewhere else.
Yeah, I love it. I guess the thing that keeps popping up to mind is that like labor cannot be the only way that we understand value. And I think like the way that you're framing this question of like, can we think of care beyond labor, is to say where like capitalism and values established by capitalism is not the same thing that we bring to like the care work. Because like, there's just the structure of value, whether we think about it through capitalism, racial capitalism, anti-Blackness, there's just like so many structures of value in which we will never win. But like we also get to have a say in, even if they're in the like smallest pockets, even if it's in, and I love the language you use, like the truth and the dreams, like even if it's there, that's like a different system of value, a different way of like regarding how it is that we make use of our time, our work, um, our like relation to one another. That I think is deep. It's like deeply meaningful, and maybe for me, this conversation keeps echoing back to the what also feels so pervasive of the like the um the erosion and exhaustion and like the pressure, like, and the burnout, like all of that is present, but yet there are also these moments that where, and I hope that those moments become longer and start to feel more like days and weeks and lifetimes, where it's like about living in accordance to an alternative system of value, living it's like I love sci-fi. I'm a avid reader of Black science fiction, and one of the most interesting scholars that I've been reading lately has just been like kind of thinking about the fact that we already live in multiple worlds, that like it just means like acknowledging that we're in another world at the same time that we live in this one. And I feel like um that is a kind of pointing at these kind of different systems of value that we get to draw upon, that we get to access, make use of, extend to others. And that's not the same thing as saying like, and so we're washed of this world, but that like I feel, part of the tenderness that I feel in this conversation and the gratitude that I feel for your being and presence and willingness to be in conversation, is to say that like maybe there is something to be named even here about another world and other worlds that are made possible by um, feeling differently connected, feeling this like feeling and acknowledging a sense of intimacy among us. And so anyway, I don't want to overstate it, but it feels like it feels important to know how frequently one um, has to redesign the terms in which one's value is being um, assessed or appraised or even given internally to oneself.
Mhm, mhm,
That's
mhm.
real. What I was gonna say, and I agree with you, C. Riley, and also kind of um, add a little bit to answer your question. Um, I don't, in the way that everything is just operating right now, there's no way that we can that we can disconnect those two. Um, and A lot of the reason why I brought labor up in the first place um, is some of C. Riley's work in transnecro politics, and how some of that labor, and also who, as a society, who are we deeming has to do that labor, right? Is somewhat of a form of that death that I was speaking about earlier. Um, and in what body types, right, have to perform these types of things. We know the lunch lady stereotype, we know that trope, right? We know the mammy trope, we know all of these different types of tropes, and we also know normally what different and I'm saying this straight up, what bodies are placed into those roles. um and again, what are the in adding that with capitalism, right? Um, what are the consequences if you do not participate in those things? And so, what I can say, I guess, what I can say a little bit for me, in my experience of setting boundaries of that visibility, for that visibility, what am I putting out? What am I not putting out? What can I keep to myself? What can I keep in this house? What can I keep here? Um, and uh, I think about all of the boys that I have lost over the years, um, those who were visible and those who were not, and what exactly was their capacity of visibility for them, of Boogie, of Darrell, of James, of Riley, of all of these people, over the years. I'm 25, right? Um, what is the healing for that look like? Being able to talk to your ancestors, being able to speak to those who are not currently on this earth anymore. Um, and being able to champion them every day and uplift them, while also being able to still have that peace of mind, And is that a sacrifice that is always going to occur no matter what, because of the, yeah, again, think about consequences. And I guess for me right now, I'm in a state of low-key the rabbit hole of trans necropolys in the ways that we are forced to do these things. And I guess when and ultimately to be able to exist, just exist, literally. Will actually not only be able to exist, but also be able to thrive. And I think the two different, when we're talking about liberation, right? How exactly are we moving towards liberation? I guess. And so for in my experience, and I might be jumping ahead, but in my experience with my relationship with Texas Isaiah and working, being a sitter and subject on for the project, there were a lot of things that hit me when I went to that opening. When my partner Saturn and I went to that opening, I was in community. I met and found so many other of the boys, right? Dash, Sir Lex, right? And all of us sitting to the and at the realization that, whoa, we have a lot of things in common. How intentional was this that we're, normally behind the camera and this time we're in front? How intentional was it that Sir Lex is the only person who is facing the camera, the only person that's looking at the camera, right? What are all of these things and how do they translate into our experiences in the real life? That was really something to sit with as well. So hope I didn't jump too much, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Um, There's so much, which I'm grateful for. I want to sort of touch base on Kaite a bit. And, I never met Kaite personally, and this is something that has been, within interviews, but I ended up living in the house in which he had passed away in. And had not heard of them prior to that, but the house still recognized, their spirit via altars. And I think that's how my relationship with altars grew, was because I was directly near their altar. So my altar and their altar were always in conversation. And I think it just led to a lot of my introduction to dream work. That house was very powerful. And I think that it helped me grow spiritually in many ways. It was quite intense to walk into spirit, I should say. I don't think, I know some people do talk about that, but, I think that, when you hear narratives about walking into spirit, it's always like, hummingbirds, and sunflowers and stuff like that. But it was extremely difficult, also being that I was, that space that I was in physically was preparing to walk into a surgery that, that saved my life. A surgery that I did a lot of spiritual work around my body for, and through Terrell and Marshall Green and some other people who were tethered to Kaite, there was this weird thing that happened where I felt like I knew them, but I did not. And so there was this grief that was present where I was like, I'm grieving someone that I've never met before in this physical time, in this physical life, right? And trying to find ways to navigate that. you know, without taking away from the grief, right? That people who spent time with them in real life continue to feel. You know, it makes me think of this Audre Lorde quote, you know, where she says, I have, you know, died many deaths that were not mine. um, and like I feel like Kaite's spirit has always just been a part of my work. You know, I think that they have been present during like the My Name Is My Name series, which, you know, was mostly all self-portraiture, you know, so thinking about how to insert like myself, my spirit into um, this visual canon, right? And then moving on to Flowers, where, you know, honoring Kaite with an altar was something that was always sort of a part of the blueprint of how to present, you know, flowers in the physical space, and to be responsible within that, right? Because I think that Flowers went through so many like different scripts, and what I didn't want to do is speak on someone that I didn't know in real time, you know. um you know, as somebody who has their own guest list for their funeral, you know, it's like I don't want I don't want nobody to speak on me who didn't know me, you know. But you know, what does it look like to honor like a person who was here, and a person who did this work, a person who has taught me, right? A person who um created a space for me to like meet some of the most beautiful people that I've ever met, you know. um and you know, when people travel through that space, you know, the first altar you'll see is like my childhood altar, and then Kaite's altar is the second one, and then there's altar for Blake Brocketon. But you know, Kaite's altar has so much to do with water and breathing, because that was the theme that existed within you know, my time at that house. It was literally breathing, how to breathe, right? um how to be like water, um how to be open to like that movement, that continuous movement. um and so yeah, you know, I want to bring, you know, Kaite back into the space. I also want to bring Blake Brocketon into the space as well. You know, I feel like his altar is a little bit different. um it holds a you know, when I've walked people through the space, you know, I always say that, you know, his altar holds a little bit of resentment, because there's a casting of um, the upper part of my teeth from my grills. And as we know, you know, some of our all of our teeth are like connected to different parts of our organ, and so specifically there are two that are very significant, because they're, you know, tethered to anger and resentment, which I do feel around his passing. Also, you know, as well as Kaite's passing, but I think that they're just different, right? um, Acknowledging, you know, the ways that trans masculine people, how they are no longer here, why they are no longer here, um, and holding that anger and being present in that, you know, to say that I'm still pissed off about this, you know, because he should still be here. Um, you know, and I grieve them very deeply at times, you know. And it's immense, and it feels like it becomes heavier as time goes on, right? But I think Bearboi, going back to like, I guess, you know, I think, you know, what's so interesting was that you, and maybe not a lot of people know this, so I should share. Bearboi and I met on Clubhouse. We met on Clubhouse. I met so many amazing people on Clubhouse. I mean, you know, that space was also very violent, as every digital space can be, but met some pretty incredible people, was able to connect. And, you know, I was randomly You know, I think it was April or May, just randomly kind of thinking about, you know, what I was going to do for this residency, because, you know, honestly, it was very stuck. And I hit them up, we were talking, and I was like, hey, you know, does this like resonate with you? You know, and they were like, yeah, it does. And I was like, okay, I'm coming to Minneapolis. um, and I booked a ticket because, you know, that's just the kind of person I am, very adventurous. And I had never been to Minneapolis before, and it was going to be the first time that we would like physically meet each other. You know, that's a lot. Especially as, you know, to be someone who's being imaged, there's just a lot, you know. And, you know, I think that when I met them and their partner Saturn, it just kind of felt like we like had known each other for a while. We kind of just like fell into this thing, like we had not seen each other. So we just were hanging out. We hung out a lot. You know, I saw this cat every day. I was also staying like 2 or 3 blocks away from them. So it'd be like,
Yup.
hey, what you doing today? You know, which is so beautiful. And so one of my friends, Blue Bone, who's an amazing artist in Minneapolis, you know, when I arrived, you know, he picked me up from the airport and he introduced me to the lake that I photographed at Bearboi in, because Blue does not live too far away from there. And there was just something that like, there was something that like called me into that space. You know, it's an engineered lake. And it was also so beautiful. There's just something so beautiful and so like vast about it. And I didn't question it, you know? And so I think when we did our session there, our conversation was so full, you know, being able to talk about many things that I may often feel like I don't have space to talk about. And I also think that Bearboi's like perspective is sort of like the main vehicle of the project, because, you know, you know, they navigate the world, you know, within non-binariness, you know, and I feel like there's so much liberation within that capaciousness. And so it is why, you know, they have more photos, you know, also their positionality in terms of like their body type. You know, when we're talking about colorism, when we're talking about anti-Blackness, you know, I wanted them to sort of like be the main person, the main spirit, like within this tale, right? Which is why that image of them by the river is called New World in My View, you know, which is a song by Sister Gertrude Morgan. You know, she was born in the 1900s in Alabama and then moved to New Orleans. She was a self-taught artist. She was actually very popular and very successful. And she didn't want to be visible anymore in that way. And so she turned to gospel music. And so there's this beautiful song called New World in My View. And yeah, it's one of the main reasons why Bearboi, yes, is such a main factor, a main spirit, because that ideology, that kind of thinking to me is like what is going to drive us home, you know? And it's not that the other sitters are like supportive. They're also equally important, but I think it highlights how important we are in so many different ways, right? And so because, you know, Dash was one of the first people that I photographed for Flowers, way like just, you know, in 2019, I think that being able to get to know Dash, being able to get to know Bearboi, being able to get to know Lex, I think there are certain like parts of their personalities that are very present. To me, that was very important. I'll leave it there, but I think that, you know, the thinking behind like how the work was going to be photographically curated and then also positioned in a physical space, yes, had so much to do with that connectivity. And you know, it's a gamble to, you know, just meet somebody randomly and image them and get to know that. But like, I think that speaks so much to spirit, because I just felt like I knew this person for like, I've known this person for a very long time. Like we can just kind of fell into it, you know? And that's beautiful. And I don't question things like that, you know?
When I tell y'all my cat came out for Texas Isaiah, that child don't come out for nobody. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the lake and that experience with Texas Isaiah. I've been to that lake once before, but I wasn't able to actually really soak it all in. I was on the other side of the lake by the pier. But when I met Texas Isaiah in person, wow, I literally felt like this is community. This is not only community, but this is like someone is talking to me through this person. A spirit from, from a long time ago, right? But also too, how Texas Isaiah thinks and how, he thought about this project, right? And how honored I was to not only be a part of it, but also have those discussions, those very full, fulfilling discussions, but also very transformative as well. We were speaking about a little bit about that experience of being visible, right? And also having the boundaries in order to say I'm only showing you what I want to show you, right? And it was very comfortable being photographed by Texas Isaiah in ways that I've never felt comfortable before. Texas Isaiah had me up in trees. I had never climbed a tree before. Tell you right now. Not one of them little. I was a Girl Scout, but we ain't climbing no trees. In the trees, and then also that was around the first time that I had ever worn overalls in at least a decade or two. And I was also shirtless. And so being seen, we're shooting at a public lake, right? While there are not only non-Black people around, right? But also a whole bunch of cis people, right? And kind of, people staring, people looking, people, trying to figure out, oh, what's going on, right? Being able to still focus within and being able to connect with the land and being able to connect with the energy of this project really kind of helped. And a lot of that wouldn't have been able to be done if it wasn't for Texas Isaiah to be able to kind of guide me, help me with, kind of just being still and really taking into account the past few years of my life of top surgery. I had top surgery back in 2019, and some of the grieving around that and the grieving around how people perceive you now or how people perceive me now. So that whole day was just a really good day for me. And also just, I learned a lot about Texas Isaiah, not only as an artist, but also as a person. And so being able to distinguish, okay, who is this person outside of labor when, okay, I can actually say that I want to get to know you outside of with the care, but also just you as a whole. And not only what you're bringing to the table of advocacy and liberation. Thank you. Also give good hugs. Texas Isaiah ain't tell y'all that.
Riley, what's your relationship to Texas Isaiah? Have you been photographed by him? Or
I have not been photographed. In fact, we started communicating through the invitation to write for this exhibit. And so, you know, I knew of Texas Isaiah before we actually were in touch. And the process of writing while the show was in formation also allowed for us to like have a whole bunch of different conversations that did and did not show up on the page in terms of the piece. But I feel so like, you know, grateful for those conversations and kind of getting a sense of what feels resonant and familiar about like working across different mediums. You know, I mean, I think a lot about how we talked about Kaite and we talked about Blake, and I think I probably talked to you about Tony McDade, because I think it was like right around the time that I was invited to write, I was really in a deep moment of grief, and like really, you know, like thinking. So I started hormone treatment like the day that I found out that Tony McDade was murdered by the police, and so it was trying to under feel my way and understand my way in that combination, and beginning, like I think we took a turn in our conversation to talk about folks who are ancestors, even as like we we come to be related to them posthumously. And you know, there's so much about like what does it mean to move with intention, and also like, you know, I think there's something about like the sharing, the collectivity, the like desire to understand oneself is not individuated from, not connected. Like to understand us is already being in a relation, even if we haven't quite met yet, or haven't met um, formally yet. That, you know, I think that there's a space that I was hearing for like, what does it mean to be in a practice of collective grief as another kind of politic, um, that is not appropriative, but is also respecting that there are different levels and registers of grief depending on how one understands their own relation and intimacy. Um, so I think, yeah, I mean, I also feel really like um, I got to read your artist statement, Texas Isaiah, after I submitted my exhibit essay, and it was such a revelation to see like all of the moments of touching, like the like the thoughts, like finding these various points of connection, even as we kind of wrote separately in a certain way. I don't know. We haven't actually had a chance to talk about it. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the writing pieces, like, and on your practice of writing around this exhibit. Um, yeah, I'll pause there. But I also just want to, on the topic of writing, I want to shout out Jen Haratwan, who was the co-author on Trans Necropolitics. I did not want it to seem as if I wrote that on my own.
Correct. Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, I appreciate you. We actually met on during the private opening for the first time, which was really special. Yeah, you know, I'm very I'm very particular about who writes about my work, and it's not because I want to have control over that, but I think I have had some questionable experiences with writers and how they write just about transness and gender. And so, you know, writing is very important to me, and I love, like, it's also something that I have a very like complicated relationship with writing, right? Also, who doesn't? And so, you know, who I bring in to write about my work is equally as important as becoming a better writer. which I have, last year I think was a little bit difficult to dedicate that space to, because it's just so hard to do anything, let alone write. But this year, I'm diligently, try to practice writing every day. And, I know I shared like a huge Google Doc with you around my writing, because I also, as somebody who's like dyslexic, and also just like being within this pandemic, I didn't really want to sit and have to like verbally share all of these ideas, like it's so laborious to do all of that. And so it was helpful for me to sort of like write everything down, right? And not in a way that's like very linear, but just to think about like, this is just, maybe a soft entry to an idea that I may or may not explore. And I'm assuming you're talking about the artist statement that's sort of tethered to the show.
Yes.
Yeah, so that wasn't directly written by me. But I will, I did have to make edits. And I'll be very honest about that. I think the way perhaps that it was written about in the beginning was just kind of interesting. I think it, what it's teaching me right now is that I don't think that there are a lot of people who can write about this work right now. And that has nothing to do with anybody's intelligence or, their work ethic, their idea making. But this is, I think that, I'm trying to pace my language, because it's not so much about this being the most incredible work that has ever been made. I'm not saying that, but I do think that what it is speaking to, right? This idea of transmasculinity that is tethered to Black girlhood, I think people are really gagged. I don't think that people really, I don't think people really know what to do with that. And that's what it's felt like to be associated with institutions and people who are tethered to institutions. Like, there are very few writers that I feel like, have gotten it right off of the bat. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I find excitement in people being challenged. Because also, when I think about like the kind of space that I've taken up in this residency, as a Black trans person, and also as an autodidact, like I want people to understand that they need to make more space within their own thinking if they are going to invite other people that have the same experiences with gathering knowledge, right, as I do, or the same kind of lived experiences. And so, yeah, I think, yeah, there was a little difficulty around the writing. And again, that's not a bad thing, but it definitely inspired me to be better at writing. Because I want people to have their own like revelations when they're viewing the work, right? I don't want things to be spoken about incorrectly. And I think that has happened a lot. Like, I remember like, some people who have seen the work like automatically assumed that, these Black trans spirits were dead. And I'm like, no, they're dreaming. Why does an averted gaze, have to be associated with death? And it makes me think about like, that's how people viewed Black trans people, is that it's either high success, whatever that may mean subjectively in media, or death. That's all you have. And so when I was approaching this work, what I wanted it to be was quiet. And quiet work goes unseen. But at the same time, I think, you know, regardless of this residency, the work would have been made regardless, you know? And so like, I think that, you know, what I wanted to speak to, you know, within the write-in, and as this work continues to grow, you know, because I'm in the first sort of like stages of continuing to work right now, is, you know, I want the quietness and the dreamscapes, and this idea of moving away from utopias, ideas around presence, right? Ideas around like care and love, remembrance, restructuring our relationship to gazes, um, questioning who we think we know maybe in an image, right? I want all of these things to be considered within the work outside of, you know, outside of death or outside of people's like limitations of gender or what they may know of it to be, right? Because of how they relate to it, you know, but I want people to think more about that. And so, yes, I think writing about it was just like really, it was so difficult. To accumulate all of these thoughts in a short amount of time. And so I'm really grateful for like your writing, you know, like I'm really grateful for all of the writing that I have enjoyed immensely, because they're all different, you know, and I want to be able to have that choice, you know. And so, yeah, no, I thank you, you know, just to be, that you said yes and to be a part of it. Even as I was like going through immense stages of grief and still am. And to figure out how to like work with each other within that is hard, you know, like it was really hard to, you know, to be a part of email threads and to like, you know, all of these things are still difficult.
Yeah.
But I am just immensely honored to like be in conversation with each and every one of you, even throughout the course, you know, of creating this work, and also outside of that, like while we're thinking about friendship.
Thank you.
I wanted to just quickly acknowledge, you know, see Riley, how you were feeling, um, you know, you starting HRT the same exact day that you found out about Tony McDade, um, and kind of just hold that. um, I I don't know exactly, you know, how you're feeling, and I don't know if you would like to share a little bit, um, or we can talk about that in the back channel. But I just wanted to uplift that real quick, um, and um, my experience with hearing um, Dash and Lex's experiences as well, and their relationship to Texas Isaiah and also to the project. Um, Tony McDade's name came up off a lot in that conversation. Um, and I find it difficult when a good portion of our community is still not talking about Tony McDade, um, and um, and the others too, right? Um, so I just wanted to say that, and also I understood the dreaming part. I don't really understand the death part. I understood the dreaming part. Like, this is real. Even in the way that you can see Dash and um, um, me, Dash, and Lex posing, right? The poses, our faces, the eyes that are of course closed, right? But even I was even looking at how Texas how you even like captured our eyelashes in a way. And I find some type of connection to eyelashes, right? How we some type of innocence in a way, And so can you see the soul of someone through their eyes? How can you see that if their eyes are closed? But there are multiple ways. And so I I felt that in the photographs. So that's what I wanted to say. Terrell, I saw you. Go ahead.
I want to see. I don't know if see. I don't know if you want to comment on what Bearboi kind of offered.
Honestly, the response I have is gratitude. Thank you. Right. Like, and I appreciate the resonance. I don't have much more to share other than like, Tony is a part of how I think about my like ancestral practice. And it's very meaningful to also understand that this is registered for many of us, that like, we're in a process. Grief, what is it? Grief is halved when it's shared. Yeah. So it's meaningful for you to pull it out. So appreciate that.
How do I consolidate? I guess, yeah. I'm not going to be able to make plain the significance of this conversation for me, and what it means to call ancestors into a space. Yeah, I just have a moment of silence, And, yeah, I mean, Black trans emotionality, what's to be said? That's what comes to mind. And you always bring this up to me at Texas Isaiah, and I appreciate the nature of this conversation, like the opportunity to have like private conversations in public, because we talk about Tony, like that day, like me and the person that was closest to me at the time, we had to talk about it because we was angry, and that's a part of Black emotionality, is this complex grief and deep care and concern about each other that looks like rage to people. But I'm grateful for acknowledgement, because and what it means to see each other, because in Tony's passing there was a certain, for lack of better words, there was a certain visibility, there was a certain witness that I think I know I had around the importance of like Black emotionality and the freedom to feel, just stood out. It's like, that person is feeling some shit, and deserve space, to move through. And that's where my grief lied. And then just the witness of them being, I'm going to take this up. I'm going to take my own witness up in my own hands. Like, I'm going to hold myself best way I can. So I just want to acknowledge that in that way. yeah, and y'all mentioned friendship. Somebody mentioned friendship. um, I can't recall right now how long we've been friends, Texas Isaiah.
When I first moved, it's almost 5 years.
Almost 5 years.
You're my first friend in LA. Or I should say the first person that I really liked that I was in. I'm not gonna lie. It's very difficult to make friends in LA, as just a new person. But I think that I was humbled by, just being a Brooklyn boy and like, being associated with people that I like knew that I was in a compatible with. I think that was this is a very certain kind of growth that you have to deal with, where you're like, oh, there's nothing wrong with us. We just not hitting it, and that's fine. But I think from day one, like I, always cherished the way that you moved like throughout spaces. You always have like deeply honored yourself wherever you've been. I feel like we've mostly, also connected like through sound and music, we be dancing.
Floors. Take up.
um,
Be on tables, y'all. We be on tables. Anyways.
So Texas was on the stage.
We be on tables, like just in the right moment, in the right space.
but yeah, just like, your connection, to that space that I was living in and to Kaite, like, I mean, we've been friends for a while. 5 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's 10 at this point. I think COVID added an extra 5 years to everything. I'm actually 87. That's
Oh man. Yeah. I appreciate your friendship in the way that it's how reflexive I feel are witnesses of each other. As someone that has been, I mean, this has taken years for me to even be comfortable to talk about the things we talk about in front of other people. I've also just been photographed by Texas Isaiah in private, like I appreciate the moments that he's taken to photograph me and given me opportunity to hold those photos for myself and for my own spiritual communion, like because personally I'm just not someone that is used to seeing myself outside, like if that makes sense, like my external idea of like what I look like and stuff isn't always there. What's true to me is like very internal. And just this friendship has allowed me to consider, the impact of my existence, the worth of my existence to others. And I'm just I just want to highlight the power of that, when one, like we mentioned before, like when like we're not all responsible for the institutional impacts of oppression, but like we can like engage with each other in a way that is caring and supports advocacy in and of itself as just a daily act, a natural, maybe even affinity for each other, a natural means of affinity and recognition. So I'm grateful to be able to talk about your work and hear how it has impacted other people. And yeah, and this idea of continuing to be photographed by you um, in the container that we create together, you know. Um, not many folks can say that and, mature as an image maker, as a photographer, as a visual narrative person. Yeah, to make a name, to create an image of your own liking, to create an embodiment, a creative embodiment of your own liking. I just want to honor that, you know. Yeah. I could say more, but it's gonna take me a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you all. I appreciate our ancestors, um, the people who are here, breathing, living, loving, um, establishing new terrains for us.
Yes.
You know, something my dad, something that I say to people is like, there's no me without you. And something my dad tells me very often, you know, when I thank him for anything, my parents are, from Guyana and Venezuela, Barbados, they Black indigenous folks. And yeah, whenever, say thank you to my dad, he says something so empowering to me every time that still like knocks me off of my feet, which I'm grateful that I can say that my dad does that, I had a very complicated relationship with him, but he says, you are ours. You are ours, and we're here to like love you. And I think about, when I'm no longer here, which is something I've always thought about because I, am someone who walks not only with this contemporary life, but also with my past lives. So I'm like, I'll return. Hopefully I'll be a tree or something, a little bit low capacity for a couple hundred years because I'm a little tired. Uh, but I think about, people can talk about the work and the creations and all of these things all they want, but the thing that I value the most is what people say about me and how I loved them and how I cared for them and maybe how I failed at that. How I held myself responsible for when I made mistakes, when I failed at certain things, because I'm a human being. And I think like so much of me is so tethered to the people that I love, the people that I know that I love, but also the people that I have yet to meet. And so, it's almost time, and I wanted to extend like just a deep gratitude to you all. And I am so excited to continue to get to know you all individually. I hope that one day we can also be in the same physical space because I'm a water sign, so I love seeing other people meet each other, and I'm just in the corner, minding my own business, eating on the food. But I pray on y'all, and yeah, there's just deep love there. And so, I see all three of you. I do value what you do put into the world, but I value your personhoods even more. So thank you so much just for being here with me, for saying yes in all the ways. Like I do not take that lightly. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again. Very honored to have been a part of this project, and also, um, you know, very honored to just be in conversation with you. To get to know your heart, and your personhood, but also want to thank you in helping me find purpose in my work and being more confident in my work as well. Um, and being able to say I met people who um, have similar experiences um, like me, that not alone, right? Um, there ain't no blueprint of being black and trans. There's no blueprint of that, right? We making it up. We here. Um, but I just wanted to add that, and also add, helping me with friendship, um, and providing, a space for that. Um, the other sitters, Dash and Lex, those were amazing conversations, amazing just times, and great times that we will continue on. And I'm still in contact with both of them to this day. So I just wanted to thank you on that, and also to Terrell, and also C. Riley, I wanted to thank you for the conversation, and great to be here. Thank you.
Just gratitude. That's it. Like just full of gratitude, you know? Yeah. I feel very moved.
Yeah, until next time. I mean,
That part.
Reynolds.
We're not saying bye. We saying next time.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, the beginning.
Learn that from my partner down from the south. You don't say bye. Say until next time.
I should.
Cool. Hey y'all.
Are we done? Yeah, we done.
Are we good?
Tanya, the amount of tears that have been shared, I just want to lean into the stillness, which I really value and appreciate, in the quietness. And I really, I'm really grateful that you allowed us to just witness, not engage, but just witness what, it's these moments of gratitude where it's like, this work is hard. Like, to exist in these spaces that we exist within is really hard. And I feel really fortunate that we can be a part of opportunities to bring people together so they don't feel alone. Because I think that is, it's just a recurring element. And Terrell, I just want to lean onto something that you said, dreams as building blocks for everyday presence. And then you think about, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And tonight really felt like such a manifestation of that, and their continued presence and existence with the work that we keep doing and have to do and will continue to do, and then pass it along to those who come next, because you are creating the blueprint. We are creating the blueprint. So I just have so much gratitude. And Melania, I want to give you a chance to say anything if you want.
I feel like there's so much to say. I feel like I feel so blessed to have witnessed this, and thank you for the opportunity and the trust that you've put in us to hold space for you and these feelings and these theories that are, ever growing. And I'm definitely going to carry everything that all four of you said forward into my daily life and daily spiritual practices. I'm going to be downloading this for a while, but I just want to say thank you so much. You know, taking notes feels kind of academic, but I definitely feel like a lot of it was also journaling and reflecting and applying like the wisdom really that you all have put forth tonight. And just, you know, I'm excited to see the world that we're creating in the present.
Thank y'all so much. You know, I've said this before, public program has been my favorite. Feel free to tell other people that, I don't really care, but public programming has been the realest. And I just, and the reason why I say that is because I felt like I've been able to show up emotionally as I am within this 11-month residency. That is my first residency as an artist. You know, it's a lot to do that in the pandemic. So I really appreciate the ways that I've been able to just like feel how I feel, you know? So thank you for holding that space. And, you know, it's not goodbye, but it is definitely until next time. So thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Have a
Everybody,
good night.
sweet dreams.
All right, y'all. Be safe,
Word.
here, hydrate, and eat food. All right.
Take care, y'all.
Yeah.
Love y'all. Peace.
Bye.